I thought buying a lake cabin would bring peace. No honking cars, no micromanaging bosses, no HOA, just me, a creaky dock, some paperbacks, and the soothing slap of water against the shoreline. But instead of peace, I got Beverly. HOA President Beverly Ashcroft. Yes, there's a homeowners association here for lake cabins. And Beverly, armed with her clipboard and an overdeveloped sense of superiority, just happened to buy the property next to mine a month after I moved in. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor from hell dressed like a TJ Maxx manager on a power trip, hit that like button. And if you've had HOA drama of your own, drop it in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone. So, here's how the madness started. It was early spring when I officially moved in. The cabin used to belong to my grandfather, who built it in the 1960s. It's rustic. Read. No central air, no dishwasher, no insulation that actually works. But it has charm, and history, and a dock that stretches out like a sleepy tongue onto Lake Cypress. I was still unpacking when Beverly made her first appearance. She didn't knock. She didn't wave. She stood at the edge of my property line with a printed flyer and an expression like she smelled something sour. "Welcome to the community," she called out. "I'm the HOA president." I blinked. I didn't realize there was an HOA for lake properties. "There is," she said, stepping onto my path uninvited. "We maintain aesthetic consistency, environmental compliance, and mutual respect." Translation: she controls everything and expects you to say thank you. She handed me the flyer, 8 pages stapled in the corner, printed in Comic Sans, yes, Comic Sans, and walked away without another word. I should have read it then. I didn't. I was too busy fixing a rotting floorboard and trying to figure out which raccoon family had made my crawl space their vacation home. For the first couple of weeks, things were manageable. Beverly gave me a few judgmental glances when I parked my truck half an inch past a gravel boundary. But she didn't say anything until the incident. It started with the dock. One Friday afternoon, Beverly knocked on my door. She had on her pastel blazer and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I need to borrow your dock," she said. I stared. "Excuse me?" "My sister's wine club is hosting a tasting event, and we need an additional platform for guests to launch the paddleboards." I laughed. I thought she was joking. If she wasn't. And I told her no because, it's my dock. She'd look like I'd personally insulted her collection of hand-woven hummingbird feeders. "I'm very disappointed," she said, as if she were a kindergarten teacher and I'd eaten paste. That night I heard voices near the water. The next morning a notice was duct taped to my door. Violation. Unauthorized dock structure not in compliance with lakefront visibility regulations. Visibility regulations? What the hell does that even mean? I called the number on the notice. Beverly answered. "Elaine," she said sweetly, "it's come to our attention that your dock exceeds the allowed dimensions for lakefront visibility compliance." I reminded her that the dock had been there since 1960s. It was part of the original deed. "I understand," she said, "but it still obstructs the natural lake sightlines. It may negatively impact the experience of other homeowners." "Like you?" Silence. Then, "Have a nice day, Mr. Lane." Click. I thought that was it. A petty move. One warning. Nope. The next day, I noticed a drone hovering near my back window. It buzzed like an angry mosquito with a camera lens. I went outside, stared at it. The thing didn't move. So I waved, gave it the finger. Still didn't move. At night, I installed a motion-activated sprinkler on the dock, a high-pressure one, just in case. The next morning, I heard the most satisfying scream of my life. Turns out Beverly's lake inspection drone isn't waterproof. She filed a formal complaint again. And I filed a countersuit, well, technically, a cease and desist for surveillance harassment. The lake war had begun, and that was before I discovered what my grandfather really owned. It all blew up the day of the wine club fiasco. I had just returned from town with a 6-pack of IPA and a box of fish tacos when I saw them. 12 middle-aged women in yoga pants and floppy sun hats on my dock. Some had already launched paddleboards. 2 were snapping selfies under my pine tree, and one was, God help me, rearranging my Adirondack chairs. Beverly stood in the center like she was hosting a Hamptons gala. I marched down and said, "You're all trespassing." Beverly didn't even flinch. "Oh, please, it's just for the afternoon. We'll be done before sunset." I looked at the nearest paddleboard. A woman in capris was pouring rosé into a solo cup while shouting, "Woo," at some ducks. "No," I said, "you're done now." She pouted. "It's just water fun. It's my dock, and my liability if someone falls into the lake after a 3rd glass of Whispering Angel." Beverly narrowed her eyes. "You know, I could file an official grievance for neighbor uncooperativeness." "Oh no," I gasped, clutching my pearls. "Not the grievance file." She didn't laugh. Neither did I. I gave him 15 minutes to leave. 10 minutes later, the sprinklers went off. That's when the screaming started. The next day, I received a violation notice taped to my front window. In Beverly's handwriting, no less. Violation: failure to comply with Community Spirit Guidelines. Community Spirit Guidelines. Who wrote this? The Hallmark Channel? I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. That laugh died fast when I opened my mailbox and found a second notice, this one official-looking, with HOA letterhead and a threat of a $500 0 cents fine. For what? Lack of lake-sharing etiquette? I called my lawyer friend Rachel, who nearly choked on her sandwich. "They're fining you for being antisocial?" "Apparently, yes." We dug deeper. Turns out the HOA charter, written back in 1993, had vague language about communal waterfront access and reasonable cooperation among neighbors. It was never enforced. Until Beverly got bored. So I got creative. I bought a 6-foot-tall inflatable flamingo and staked it on the dock. Then I added 2 plastic gnomes, a windsock shaped like a trout, and a Bluetooth speaker that played the Godfather soundtrack on a loop. Beverly called it visual pollution. I called it ambience. Her next move? She emailed the entire neighborhood a photo of my flamingo army with the subject line, "Is this the kind of lakefront we want?" And it backfired. 10 people replied with things like, "Looks fun," and "I want one." One guy even asked if I sold them in bulk. So Beverly showed up in person. This time she didn't smile. "You've left me no choice," she hissed. "If you won't cooperate with our guidelines, you'll be referred to the Compliance Review Committee." "Which is you," I pointed out. "And 2 others. Let me guess, your cousin and your wine club friend?" She turned a shade of red I hadn't seen outside of marinara jars. Then came the twist. A few days later, while I was digging around my grandfather's old chest in the attic, I found something wedged under a pile of nautical maps. A manila envelope. Inside, a stack of legal papers and a map. A deed from 1971. It turns out, my grandfather didn't just own the cabin. He owned the land under the dock and the lake bed stretching 50 feet into the water. Technically, I didn't just own the dock. I owned the rights to a third of the cove, which meant The wine club had been floating on my water. Beverly had been trespassing on my dock, on my land, and on my lake rights. I nearly dropped the deed in shock. I photocopied everything, highlighted the key passages, sent a copy to Rachel, and then I waited. The next HOA meeting was in 2 days, and I had a plan. HOA meetings were always a mess, but this one felt electric. Word had gotten around that I was planning to challenge Beverly, and half the neighborhood showed up with popcorn, literally. The guy 2 doors down brought a folding chair and a bag of kettle corn like it was an outdoor movie night. Beverly opened with her usual robotic intro. Welcome, everyone. Tonight's agenda includes property compliance, noise ordinance reminders, and a new proposal for dock visibility regulation. She made it 3 bullet points in before I raised my hand. Point of order, I said. She sighed. Mr. Lane, please, don't interrupt. I have documentation that proves I own the lake bed under my dock, including the section the HOA has been using as communal space. The room went quiet. Beverly blinked. That's impossible. I pulled out the deed, held it up like it was the Ark of the Covenant. Signed and notarized in 1971, filed with the county. And unless the HOA's been paying me rent, you've all been trespassing. Someone actually whistled. Beverly's smile twitched. Let me see that. No. What do you mean, no? I've sent a copy to my attorney in the county. If the HOA continues to fine me or use my dock, it's legal trespass. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, like a fish gasping on a boat deck. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, the drone returned. This time, it had a new feature, a spotlight. It hovered over my dock at 10 p.m., beaming light directly into my living room, like some kind of suburban UFO. I hit it with a broom. I installed a second sprinkler system. This one industrial grade. It soaked the drone and my petunias. Worth it. Then I added a sign. You are now entering private lake space. Trespassers will be splashed. Next morning, Beverly filed a complaint about water misuse. During a drone war, she started. That's when I decided if she wanted to play surveillance games, I'd raise the stakes. I bought a fake security camera, installed it on a tree facing her property, and added a blinking red light. Totally legal. Completely non-functional. She lost her mind. Filed a formal protest with the HOA board. Claimed I was spying on her hydrangeas. But Beverly wasn't done. Oh no. She called a special HOA meeting. She wanted to propose emergency bylaws restricting dock ownership, limiting private lake access, and banning aesthetic disruptions like plastic flamingos, colored lights, and unauthorized nautical paraphernalia. Yes, she said paraphernalia like it was a drug bust. But this time, the community didn't back her. Half the room had inflatable flamingos now. 3 docks were suddenly covered in solar lights. And someone down the road had installed a wooden pirate ship wheel on their deck. My passive-aggressive rebellion had turned into a neighborhood movement. And the cherry on top? My lawyer Rachel sent a cease and desist to the HOA on Beverly's birthday. I didn't know it was her birthday until I saw the banner on her garage, Happy 62nd Beverly. Underneath it, she was tearing open a letter from my lawyer and yelling into her phone at someone named Trevor. I toasted her with my morning coffee. That night, I got an email from the county. Apparently, the original HOA charter was missing key zoning updates from the last 2 decades, which meant half of Beverly's rules unenforceable. She didn't know it yet, but I did. All I had to do now was wait. Turns out my grandfather wasn't just a dock enthusiast. He was a real estate ninja. I spent the next week digging through every box in the attic. Tax records, land surveys, even a yellowed lakefront map with tiny red ink marks. That's when I found it. A transfer agreement from 1974. My grandfather had purchased adjacent water rights from his old fishing buddy, who used to own the cabin next door. That property, now owned by Beverly. The map clearly marked the submerged boundary line, and it had shifted. Thanks to erosion and outdated HOA maps, Beverly's own dock now sat squarely on my underwater property. I wasn't just a lakefront homeowner anymore. I was Beverly's landlord. I called Rachel. She laughed so hard she had to mute the phone. "This is poetic," she said. "You own the water she floats on." I had the documents notarized, filed, and framed. Then I drafted a formal letter. Notice to occupant. As of date, the structure known as Dock B has been found to extend into private submerged land owned by Mr. Lane. Continued use constitutes trespassing. Please vacate the area or remit rental fees in accordance with local ordinances. I slipped it in a vanilla envelope, hand-delivered it to Beverly's mailbox, and waited. 30 minutes later, she stormed down to my cabin like a Walmart Medea. "You can't be serious," she snapped, letter in hand. "Oh, I'm extremely serious," I said, sipping my lemonade. $200, 0 cents a month, or you relocate your dock." She turned red. "This is harassment." "Nope," I said. "This is a property dispute, but feel free to call the county. They've got all the paperwork." She marched back to her house. That night, her dock lights were off. No rose parties, no paddleboards, just silence. For the first time in months, the lake felt peaceful again. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled into Beverly's driveway. Out stepped a man in a crisp navy blazer and aviator sunglasses. He looked like he sold insurance to Bond villains. Turns out he was a private mediator, hired by Beverly. She wanted to settle. We met on neutral ground, the local marina office. I brought Rachel. Beverly brought aviator blazer. The room smelled like cedar and passive aggression. She opened. "I propose mutual dock easements with shared access rights, provided both parties adhere to aesthetic standards outlined by the HOA." I smiled. "I propose you drop all complaints, admit to violating my property line, and reimburse me for drone damages." Blazer guy coughed. "Is there middle ground?" Rachel slid the folder across the table. "Our terms are final." In the end, Beverly folded. She signed an agreement, acknowledging my water rights, promising 0 drone surveillance, and revoking all HOA fines against me. In exchange, I allowed her to rent lake space for her dock for $1, 0 cents a year. Why? Because I framed the contract and hung it in my living room. Betty? Sure. Satisfying beyond words. And that would have been the end, if not for what happened at the next HOA election. The HOA election was always a snooze fest. Usually 5 people showed up, 3 of whom thought HOA stood for Hot Oatmeal Association. But this year, it was standing room only. Lawn chairs, folding stools, even a guy sitting on an upside-down recycling bin. Why? Because everyone wanted to see if Beverly would survive the vote. I didn't plan to run. I just wanted my lake and my dock and my peace. But sometimes the story writes itself. Especially when a teenager with a GoPro uploaded a highlight reel of Beverly yelling at a paddleboard, and it went viral. The title? Barren President Tries to Evict Lake Itself. A week later, a local reporter showed up. Beverly tried to block her with a clipboard. didn't work. Channel 4 ran the segment under the headline, "Whole Overreach or Lake Drama Gone Wild." By the time the election came, Beverly was clinging to power like a barnacle. We all met at the clubhouse, which looked like a retirement home designed by IKEA. Beige walls, sad ficus, one lukewarm coffee dispenser. Beverly stood at the podium, breathing heavily, like she'd just jogged there. I stood by the snack table. "Wait," she cleared her throat. "Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that experience and consistency matter in HOA leadership." Someone coughed. It sounded like tyranny. She continued, "I've worked tirelessly to uphold our community standards, beautify the lakefront, and..." I raised my hand. "Question, how does drone harassment count as beautification?" Laughter. Someone clapped. She glared. "Mr. Lane, this is not the time for..." "I'd also like to nominate someone new for HOA president." Gasps. "Tu la vache, tu la vache." I pointed to the back of the room. "The guy who runs the marina shop always smells like fish bait and freedom." He stood up, holding a glitter cannon. No, seriously, a literal glitter cannon. "I accept the nomination," he said, grinning like a man who's never seen a dress code he couldn't violate. The vote wasn't even close. Tony, 43 votes. Beverly, 4, 3 of which were probably hers, written in cursive. As Tony walked to the front, he yanked the glitter cannon's string. Oh! Gold sparkles filled the air. Half the room cheered. The other half sneezed. Beverly looked like she'd aged 5 years in 5 seconds. She quietly gathered her clipboard, purse, and dignity, what was left of it, and slipped out the back door. Tony took the mic. "First order of business," he said. "No more HOA fines for flamingos, colored lights, or dock parties. This lake is for everyone. And second," he looked straight at me, "give Lane back his $42, 0 cents he spent fighting this nonsense." Someone handed me a bag of quarters. I didn't even care. Victory tasted sweet, like lemon bars and petty justice. The next week, Tony introduced Doc Vesta, a neighborhood celebration featuring paddleboard jousting, a chili cook-off, and live music from someone's niece who may or may not have been in a Taylor Swift cover band. My dock became the spot. Families came to fish. Kids cannonballed off the edge. One guy brought a smoke machine for atmosphere. I didn't care. I was too busy relaxing in my chair, drink in hand, watching my glitter-coated water sparkle like freedom itself. And Beverly? Last I heard, she joined a knitting club in the next town over. Their bylaws don't allow glitter. As for me, I still have the deed framed in my living room. I still have the flamingo. And every now and then, when the sun hits the water just right, and the wind carries the faintest echo of "X-ow call," I smile, because I won. And if you've ever taken down a petty tyrant armed only with documents, duct tape, and spite, go ahead and smash that like button. Tell me your HOA horror stories in the comments. Subscribe for more tales of suburban survival. Because around here, the lake remembers, and so do I.